Hey, it's Travis. Too many camp directors run just on gut feel. Our free Resilient Camp Blueprint Diagnostic is your dashboard for resilience. Take it today at camp.mba/Travis. Again, that's camp.mba/Travis.
This is CampHacker. Come find our show notes and our blog for camp directors and leaders at camphacker.tv.
Good day and welcome to our podcast. This is CampHacker, episode 121, recorded on the 8th of January, 2020. On today's show, Adventure Programming and Training. This Go Camp Pro podcast is sponsored in part by RadTags. Designed by a former camp director and owner, RadTags is about connecting people to who they are, the camp they love, and the accomplishments they experience there. RadTags bracelets and tags help your camp community stay connected to their happiest place. Find out what RadTags has to offer your camp at zoic.ca/rad. Also, don't forget to visit RadTags at the ACA National Camp Conference. Be one of the first 50 people to booth 522 for a special gift from RadTags and Go Camp Pro. RadTags, be and be known. If you've gotten even one good thing from the CampHacker podcast, we would be really grateful if you rated and subscribed to the show wherever you get your favorite podcasts. There's an easy way to do that too. Just head over to ratethispodcast.com/camp. That's ratethispodcast.com/camp. Thanks for letting your awesome out, Camp Mavericks. We hope you enjoy the CampHacker show.
Hello, Camp Pros, and welcome to the CampHacker podcast. My name is Travis Allison. I run a summer camp marketing and consulting agency here in Canada that works with camps from around the world, and I help camps translate what they do so that more families understand and want to send their children to summer camp.
And my name's Gabrielle Rail. I'm one of the camp directors at Camp Waro. Camp Waro is an all-girls camp in the Laurentian Mountains, and we focus on creating a positive female community, and we do that while speaking in French and English.
Hi, I'm Joe Richards from Pierce Williams Christian Center. I'm the executive director here. Pierce Williams is the United Church of Canada summer camp and retreat facility, and I play the banjo.
Hey everyone, my name is Phil Brown. I am a lead trainer at High Five Adventure Learning Center based out of Brattleboro, Vermont.
Excellent, Phil. We're so grateful to have you here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So tell us, first of all, how you got connected into the direct industry and what your passion for it is.
Yeah, so for me at the start was summer camp. In England, that's where I'm originally from. That's what the sound is. At college, at university, I was interacted with a person who worked at an organization, CCUSA, which connected me with the world of summer camp. I was actually training, or my degree was in teaching. So my mindset was like, I want to work with some kids from another population that I'm not familiar with. So I thought, hey, summer camp could be an option for me. I ended up in a camp called New York YMCA camp, based out of Huguenot, New York. And I must admit, my first impression, my first thought was, I'm going to work in the city. I think it's the same as a lot of even Americans who don't realize that New York is bigger than the city. And so I ended up, in the low foothills of the Catskill Mountains, and at a camp there that had a large property. And I worked mainly with older boys, the older boy camp. And I just fell in love with the concept of working with kids in an environment that they were excited to be in, where they were learning about themselves, growing, the change, especially those kids who were coming at this camp did 2-week sessions, but you could opt in to stay the full 8 weeks. So there were some kids who were there who the transformation that they experienced in that 8 weeks was so incredible to me from the start to the end, that I fell in love with the concept of being able to really make positive change in a kid's life. My degree was in English literature, so I was training to be an English teacher. Yep. And I think I ended up doing a year of teaching back in England between summer camp jobs, and I just found that the pull of summer camp, was just too strong. I remember being called back and said, hey, would you like to come back? And I went, wow. I've got a job now, so this is challenging, but I'll figure it out. I'm not in college anymore. But I ended up coming back, and then after that, I was asked I was very fortunate. The camp that I ended up at had year-round programming, did outdoor education. And so they had the capacity to be able to give me full-time work, which was very exciting. And at the time I was, 21, 22. So the choice wasn't a particularly challenging one for me. I thought, if I don't make it work, I'll go home. And I just fell in love with it. I ended up living and working at that same place for 7 years. I met my wife there. I lived there. I worked there. I got married on the property.
Yes.
So similar stories to a lot of people who've entered the camp world. It's the kind of incestuous nature of camp that everyone, ends up together. But it's because you see each other through the highs and the lows. And through that, and then my transition to working at High Five was that the camp had an incredible challenge course program, had a great adventure program. And I ended up doing a lot of training, formal training, coming to High Five for my training. Both at a level 1 and then a level 2 and then a challenge course manager, and which was graciously paid for by the camp that I worked at. And I was there for so long, and I happened to meet someone from High Five and said, this is a full-time job. I can do this for a living. Already, it was a shock that I was working at camp for a living. It was like trying to explain what you do to your family and your parents, when you work at an outdoor ed site. But then eventually ended up coming to High Five, and I'm now been in the States 14 years and married, got a kid, and just loving this kind of world where I get to work outside with populations. And I feel like the work we do, adventure education, experiential education, similar to camps, we have a lot of pressure on us to be able to make really positive change that school systems can't do. Phys ed in school is the other area where they say, adventure program, that's going to be your area. Social emotional learning, that's phys ed. But summer camp has that. Summer camp has to fix all of the ills. Right. In that, and I think that they possibly can. So that's where I get excited, and that's probably my extended experience of how I ended up.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Well, we're grateful to have you. And because we knew Phil was going to be here, we decided that we would spend some time talking about challenge courses and training to be able to draw on his experience. Oddly enough, I had just last night was speaking with a bunch of people that they're taking a course that I'm working on who are from the business world, and I was explaining the principles of challenge courses and the idea that this is putting everyone at an equal position where it's a challenge for everyone. No one's coming into this as being an expert, and things are designed to give everybody a playing field that's the same and work on that. So it's interesting that we get a chance to talk about that today.
Constantly, they're the consistently, they're the great equalizer. You can take, any group, no matter what it is, and you bring them into that environment, and then it equalizes the field a little bit. Right. We're working on the exact same plane.
Yeah, right on. So, Cap, what is the value of having a challenge course to Waro and doing adventure programming stuff for the girls and the young women that you work with?
Well, I'd like to start with the Quebec Camping Association. The Quebec Camping Association partnered with the Ministry of Education and Higher Learning in Quebec to sponsor, I think it was 31 camps across Quebec to upgrade their challenge courses. And the reason why is really what you just both were talking about, is the filling the gap of what camps can do and schools can't. And one of the things that the Quebec Camp Association recognized that was true to our history was low ropes courses, and being in nature, working together, and then the value of processing after the activity that they did. So just in that, just knowing that an association partnered, I think they raised close to $200,000 to help with these camps and develop these programs, and then also train the staff to run the program so that they were used properly. So for us in Quebec, it's a high value program, and sometimes overlooked when you're looking at shiny new climbing walls, rock climbing walls, or archery, or whatever you're looking into, a zip line. The team aspect is so high, and at Waro, I think that it's anywhere from a very, very simple task to something that is challenging that other people can watch and encourage you to do. But at the very, very bare minimum, it's stuff that people don't do anywhere else. You can't find this anywhere else. And that piece with the team aspect is extremely valuable.
Right. Joe, before I ask you some specifics, Phil, I wonder if you have a working, ready-to-go definition of adventure programming challenge courses, however you want to define it these days.
Yeah, and I think that there's a good distinction as well, and it's what Gabby was referencing, that it doesn't have to be this big giant course. I think that sometimes when people say the word challenge course, I think sometimes jump into that mindset of a zip tour or something very, very high in the air. And I think that the challenge component can just be the opportunity to stretch oneself into a period where they're having conversation that can be tough. So sometimes activities can just be those. So I think for adventure education, it's always been that concept of creating environments, creating experiences where people are allowed to stretch themselves into what we would call either the stretch, the challenge, or the growth zone. In experiential education, there's called the experiential learning cycle. And in that, there's concepts around how we learn. We have an experience, we're able to gain learning from that experience, and then that guides the next experience we have. So, and I think there's a misconception sometimes with adventure that it means skydiving, whitewater rafting, kayaking. I was once introduced at a conference as the kayaking guy, and I said, no, we don't do kayaking. We're an adventure learning center, but that's not our model. Our model is creating experiences that allow for individual and team growth. And I think the adventure component is the challenge course. That's an adventurous experience. And that's unique. When we bring groups, one of the first questions I ask people is to define the word adventure. How do you define it? What do you say is an adventurous experience? And if you really boil down an adventurous experience, it's, you're doing something that's unknown, unique, just like Gabby said, something you've never done before, possibly. Mm-hmm. There's a learning outcome there. And it might be something that creates a little bit of tension, a little bit of stretch for you. But that could be speaking in public. Sometimes we get groups who will say, show of hands, who wants to speak or to demonstrate. We just did a high five, let's say, we did a wild turkey handshake and said, oh, who would like to do the wild turkey handshake in front of the group? Well, a lot of people don't want to do that. That for them is an adventure. So adventure education, I think, has that mindset that we're stretching you, we're allowing you to grow, but it doesn't have to be whitewater rafting, kayaking. Because the origin point from all of this stuff was stuff like outward bound trips, where you would be taken on multi-day excursions, and they would be adventurous. And it just happens to be that the challenge course is a tool for our learning, just like a game, a fleece ball, a rubber chicken. All of those components could still be tools in the repertoire of adventure education.
Right. And I'm thinking back to some of the origins and where this stuff entered the mindset of outdoor educators and camp directors. It also comes out of sailing training too, and big ship sailing training. And before there was ECCT and any sort of standardization, and kind of the thoughtfulness around us, there was Ebertisms and the stuff that was built out of sailing training, big ship sailing training that had been brought to camp to different points too.
And if you go to some old challenge courses, you'll see elements that have a very military feel to them, just like a military obstacle course, because that was a lot of the ideas were from there. I was recently at a school that had a commando crawl along their ceiling, which was that position. Now we've changed the models now to fit much more team development, and we've taken away some of that, but that's certainly where they came from.
Right. So Joe, for you, what value do you see as a camp director in investing the time and finances in this?
I think that I see the value in investing. We do not have a course. When I arrived, we had a low ropes course, a low ropes challenge course, and slowly it has become almost non-existent. And one of the reasons is that it's this idea that team building and portable initiatives are actually more useful in our setting because we change where camp happens at Pierce Williams. So there's a couple of different sites, and we do trips to schools, and we do trips to churches. And so anything that we can take and take that same learning experience and sort of give it in a way that is portable, so that it's not them having to come to a specific location. Because I think the value is investing in equipment that can be used in multiple ways, and that doesn't need to be inspected every year by somebody. Even if you know how to build it, you're not qualified to inspect your own. And that's one of the really big challenges, right? Insurance has always been a huge concern for some of these courses and climbing walls, and so we've shied away from it before my time. But the value I find is in investing in simple things that our staff can use numerous different ways as well. So it's not just one nitro crossing or one whale watch. It's an idea that they have a series of platforms that they can use for any variety of things. So I think there's a huge value in it. And I do staff development, staff construction's a session that we call it. We do it for an hour every day during staff training, and it's teamwork, team play, group initiatives, because if you do not invest in that with your staff, you are missing the opportunity to see to help them come together as a team, so that in the future, during the summer, that they don't fail you miserably when they have to come together as a team under other auspicious circumstances. So there's a huge value in it. We've shied away from building physical elements.
Right.
And I think there's a pitfall of jumping into the mindset that you have to have these highs. Like when I train, I recently was at a challenge course that I was training at a camp, and I was trying to train their staff to not use their zip, to not use their giant swing, to not use their pamper jump, leap of faith. Because I want people to get better at using that as a tool. It's a tool. It's not the end, be all and end all of your program. And that's a problem when I see camps, when we have clients call us and they want a challenge course. Sometimes they'll come with this list. This is the things I need.
Yeah.
And what we do, and this is something that I think High Five does really well, is that we do a site visit where both a builder, one of our construction team, and also a trainer, myself, a facilitator, joins in that site visit, and we ask questions about what the goals are. Because if we hear from the executive director of this camp that they want it as a marketing ploy, potentially, where they want this very visual thing right in the middle of the field, and it's to take photos of and really demonstrate, and they want every single kid to go on it, that misses the mark from our perspective. It's an educational tool, and it could be used that way. And they could save their dollars just investing in really quality facilitation training, and negate the need for a climbing tower or a zip or even lows that are, element specific. And so I think that that's, from our perspective, that's why we're an educational org. And I would add the other caveat for listeners that we're a professional vendor member of ACCT, but we are one of, I think, only 4 vendor members that is purely educational focused. We don't build aero adventure parks or zip tours. So for us, those challenge courses are tools. And so if we can invest the time and energy into a camp to say, you know what, you don't need a zip. You don't need to spend $30,000 on a climbing tower. You need to spend $1,200 for a couple of days of quality training that I can teach your staff how to better frame an activity, better run the activity, and better reflect upon it. Then that's the golden opportunity right there. They don't need this course. And I think people jump into the pitfall of jumping into, I'm going to spend a lot of money. I just got a huge grant. I'm going to buy that. No. Invest your money into quality training and then let the course come after.
And Phil, I think that goes to a larger challenge that I only discovered after I left the camp I grew up at, because the camp I grew up at had nothing, like zero programming. And so when I went specifically to a private camp that had everything from ski boats to an outdoor gymnasium to a ropes course to some gyro thing that I got stuck in one day to, The challenge is that the staff rely on the thing. So be it canoeing or be it sailing, or which are valuable, but if you're not teaching the human component of those elements, it's just you're not using the tool to its full.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree. I think that if you have because I get staff, trust me, I've been here 15 years and I get staff members who are like, why don't you get a high ropes course? And I'm like, there are other people who do that way better than we are ever going to do it. It's the same reason I'm not going to start leading canoe trips. There are other camps that can do it a ton better. And I think that's a challenge that a lot of camp people have, be it owners or executive directors, is they think they need it because somebody else has it. Yeah. They think they're in constant competition, when if you just provide a much better structured, facilitated, personal experience that still gets to the same outcome, I think that there's a huge value in that as well.
And I have the benefit that in the summer months, in that 3-week window of training, I see a good number, a dozen camps that I go to. And I think the piece that sticks in my brain of those places that are great is not how much money they invested in a pole course, not how much of this thrill riding, incredible visual they have, but is how much time they spend on, do they want their staff to be really great facilitators? And that's a huge difference. If every kid is going down the zip, they like the zip because it, as in terms of operating it, you can run those kids through it, takes the time, but it's not very powerful. It could be individually powerful to an individual few people. They might have these incredible experiences, but there might be people who don't. And in terms of you creating a cohesive team component to your program, you want to focus on team development. A zip isn't necessarily going to result in you having a more cohesive team. It might have this incredible experience that you're offering, but that experience is trumped by, is the trumping factor, instead of it being, I have this really functioning team. Spend more time on ground initiatives and team development programming than the challenge course. So that would be my thought. And then build on that. But just like you said, it's going to be, it's a bigger investment to have a challenge course than just building a challenge course as well. And I think that's one of the questions, is like the costs involved. Training has to be a big component of that. Constant yearly inspections, and also gear that retires and you have to refresh, and that has to be built into a budget too. Those things are awesome, and of course we build those. So of course we want to remind people that those are great, but I would prefer people to invest in quality programming and facilitation.
Right. Cap, for you folks, what are the sort of transformations or big things that your kids are able to accomplish in terms of their own development through the adventure programming work that you folks do?
I think going back to the training bit that Phil was talking about, and Joe was talking about, I think with our staff members and the training that we do, that helps our staff members in all of our activities to teach them to break down the life skills that a camper is learning at archery, to debrief with the campers at the end of kayaking. What was your proudest moment? When did you notice the difference between you stopping and you starting? All of these aspects. And I think having the adventure program, or us, it's an abletism course really on camp, and we have different places on camp. So that's not just in one location, that staff members can, use this log to do an activity with campers, and they don't have to go all the way to the abletism course to do it. But I think that it has a purpose for our campers in the sense that it's a concentrated area of group development, and our campers choose to do that activity. It's not something that a whole cabin group will do together. This is a choice that campers choose, that they want to develop their own leadership skills, their team building skills. And I think it helps with the philosophy within our organization that this happens everywhere. This is just a concentrated area that it can continue to happen. And I think what's really interesting for us is that we will have campers that are 8 years old with campers that are 15 years old, and they choose to participate in this, and they're not getting levels, and they're not in a play in front of everybody, and they're not getting arts and craft to bring back home. They're really going for the pure enjoyment of challenging themselves and connecting with other people. But I think that if you only have adventure in your camp in one specific location, and you're not bringing that philosophy throughout camp, then we're missing the mark a little bit. And I think that just as a training program for your staff, that's really helpful to use that so that they can spread it out. But for me, it's really the conversation and the reflection at the end of a program or an experience that's one of the important sticking points. Yes. So that for us, that's the piece. But I love that our kids, or any kids, choose to do this, and it's something that they enjoy and they feel good about, and they celebrate together, of all ages.
Right.
There was a place that I worked at that used to do this thing called mandatory fun time. Right. And anytime you combine the word mandatory with fun, it's not fun. So, the concept of creating choice is important. And I think as well, if you think, I would challenge most camps to be able to say, I think they already do adventure programming, experiential education. They may not term it that. If at your camp you bring your kids into your cabin at the end of the day and you do like a Vespers or a Rose Fawn, concept of a conversation about what did you enjoy about the day, what you didn't, you're reflecting. And so that is a component of experiential education. And what you said, Gabby, as well, the connection piece, one of those core values of experiential ed is connection before content. You can never expect us to get onto the deep content until the group is connected anyway. So camps have the fortune that they have the time, which a lot of places don't have. Schools always struggle with like, I've got 42 minutes. How can I be able to solve all of this in 42? Whereas a camp has, multiple days they're living together to be able to connect. And so it has a great capacity for bigger growth areas.
Yeah, exactly. And with what Joe was saying with the paring down and putting the emphasis on the experience and not on the equipment, sometimes having the equipment and training your staff almost backwards from using the equipment to have an experience, and then paring that down to something even smaller, and then paring that down to even something smaller, like a walk from the cabin to the dining room. And how can you use that experience and sort of reverse engineer it for your staff members to just get into that deeper thinking of, when you're walking from point A to point B, you can ask questions. When you're walking from point A to point B, you can also act like ninjas and try to get that nobody can see you. And there's all of these opportunities that you can do without equipment. And I think that, one of the things that somebody had asked me, how much does it cost to build this? I say, well, how much do you have? How much do you want to spend? You don't need, if you have $50, let's figure that out. If you have $200, let's figure that out, and not to get overwhelmed by it. But how can you sort of maybe reverse engineer through experiences, but get staff members to the point where they're able to see opportunity in everything that's happening at camp and have those conversations and discussions with their kids.
Yeah, the camps that struggle with creating an adventure program are the ones that just jump in too deep, too quick. They purchase something massive. They're trying to mitigate risk. It becomes a scary area. They didn't give enough training to their staff, so now the staff are super nervous using it. And I think if they just started creating an idea of a program, an adventure program, you've got this hour block that you're going to do team development with your kids. That's a great start. There doesn't have to be this big investment. But then if you get this program, then you build on it and slowly go through phases. There are a lot of camps that we've built challenge courses in multiple phases. We've budgeted out for them. We help create a curriculum. This is the start. We're going to give you a game bag, and I'm going to do a couple of days of training. Maybe 5 years down the line, we now have a climbing tower, and we have a low course, and then we have a step sequence that we can take you through, where we can say, this is the start and this is the end. But if you jump all the way to the end and the only thing you purchased was a zip, the only thing you purchased was a climbing tower, that's very challenging to operate in a sequence. How are you setting your kids up for success when you jump them straight into a zip or a challenge course, or they're straight to climbing at height? We do a workshop. We do a workshop called The Struggle is Real, where it's a concept is, how are you preparing your kids to struggle? Because they're going to struggle at height. So if you haven't prepped those participants to struggle at height if the first time they struggle is when they climb and they've got all their peers looking at them and they're embarrassed because they can't do it. That's not a great, you're only going to create some negative experiences, not necessarily leading to positive experiences. So trying to figure out how are you properly sequencing a program to fit the needs. Don't jump for the big stuff because the big ticket items. Let's build a program and then build from there. And that's where that training is super essential, super important. I can't expect a new hire, an 18-year-old, to be able to understand or be able to run this element to the best of its ability at this level. Maybe it's going to be that a returning staff is going to be doing that. Maybe there's been some built-in staff development plan and this person is now ready. But having sort of a sequence is so helpful.
Well, and I have seen I've seen a camp that when we toured it, and this was 2 summers ago, I walked by more defunct high elements than there were actual high elements, because they didn't want to expend the expense to take down the elements. But as we walked by, we were touring with a young guy. He did a great job. He wasn't the person we were supposed to be touring with in the end, but and we're like, okay, well, what's this element? He goes, oh, we don't use that anymore. And it's literally no word of a lie, Phil. We walked by almost 30 different elements that day at this one camp, and it was bizarre, beautiful. And I know why it exists that way. I know the history of it, but it is this
post-apocalyptic.
It was because and they're all high up in the
and the problem is as well, if they're built into trees, we don't even recommend you would take them down, because an arborist is not going to want to put a chainsaw to a tree that's got metal in it. So often stapled climbs, you just have to accept that they're going to disappear as the bark grows over the staple. You're not pulling that stuff out, and the cables are going to
50 years from now, somebody with a chainsaw is going to die.
Well, that's the point. We leave little traps there for some unsuspecting future arborists. But there are a number of courses that we also have built that, at schools and stuff, who got a big PEP grant, and often as well, there's these big grants come in, look at all this money I got donated from a anonymous donor or an alumni. Wow, what am I going to use this for? But there was no intentionality between how I was going to use it. I'm just going to build it. And not only do you need to have trained staff, but you also need to have champions. So we refer to those camps that really have successful programs as they have a champion on board. And that's not a staff member who's going to leave. That's a staff member who knows is going to stick around for a while. And sometimes a pitfall can be that you find an excitable staff member who wants to be trained in this field, and they start a program up and then they leave. So rather than because summer camp has so constant turnover, retention is, you're never going to retain them for decades unless they have a full-time job. What I always recommend is getting a program director or a director be the person who gets the initial training, gets the bug, gets the excitement, because they're going to be the ones that continue to invest the program, because no doubt that camp at some point lost their excitable staff members, those who saw that as beneficial, and then they didn't have enough budgeted for continuous training, so their skills start to deteriorate. They get nervous, which is completely fair and expected, that you shouldn't be I'm going to stick a kid up there. No way, I'm not going to do that. And then they have to be, really comfortable in the environment, and then when they leave, then those courses just disappear. And also, I think it comes from equipment that retires as well. And if there's no budget in your plans for replacing equipment, after 10 years, most harnesses, ropes, helmets, anything that's a nylon has a 10-year expectancy, a life expectancy. It's not going to poof away like a witch to water, but it is going to not be able to be used. And if you don't have a budget set aside, then suddenly you lost all the equipment to run the element, and you didn't have the money to reinvest. So from that perspective, I always recommend to places that you get in a habit of buying 3 harnesses a year. And that way you're never going to ever run out of harnesses, and you don't have to have a massive budget. It's an assigned budget that you can plan for. And that way you don't ever get into the position of you bought 20 harnesses and then 10 years later, all of the harnesses are retired and you have to buy 20 more, which is suddenly a big expenditure.
One thing I want to pick up on that all three of you have said, and really is such a huge, I think it's a big issue. I think it's something that that many camps aren't handling as well as I like. It's something that really bothers me. And Phil alluded to the idea of sequencing being that you start with activities that allow the group to grow and the trust to build, and then you build up to some of these things. And really the high ropes, the big challenges up there are meant to be at the end of a sequence where a lot of time has been invested in the communication skills within the group, the trust building within the group, and people understand that they could say, I can't do this, or I can't do this right now, and people will be there to support them. And I think those camps that just run kids like a mill through all of their elements can do as much damage to those children's development psychology by forcing them, by embarrassing them, as Phil's describing, how terrible for a kid who can't get off the ground on a climbing wall in front of all their peers. And if those peers haven't been fully informed and had the practice in being encouraging and being a part of something without making fun of somebody, et cetera, it just can be a terrible experience. And I think that's incredibly important, that what everybody's been saying today, if you are considering this or want to professionalize in its own way your own adventure programming, your challenge programming that you have there, the first step is to make sure that you give enough time to the groups to get ready to take on the big challenges. And certainly, as everybody said, you have to invest in the training and the equipment, because I think you can do a lot of damage to kids. And I think that when we run into complaints from parents or kids that don't want to come back, I often think that there's so many elements of that could be handled by staff being better trained in facilitating things, not pushing kids, or pushing kids in the right way, or pushing kids in the wrong way versus pushing kids in the right way to take on new challenges. And that stuff just it terrifies me, and frankly is just heartbreaking in terms of what the industry has to offer.
I think there's the concept of comfort zones, and when I'm training, let's say you've just built a challenge course, it's got highs, lows. Most often we'll recommend you should be having as a minimum 4 days of training. The first day is purely facilitation training. There'll be staff that coming for this ropes training, and we won't touch a rope until the second day. And they're like, what are we doing? So the key piece is framing them to be prepped for understanding how important their job is. I think people absolutely love challenge courses, and the reason they love them, if they've run them, is because of the incredible positive impact we have on people. And I have so many stories of incredible moments where I've brought people to tears by the life-changing experience they had. And we probably all have stories of, even outside the challenge course, but adventure programming, where you've seen this really positive change. But with that, the double-edged sword of that is that absolutely you can create negative experiences too if you push the person too far. I think terminology, semantics is an issue when people say, I'm pushing someone out of their comfort zone. I need to push you out of the comfort zone. The push piece is an aggressive term. I'm going to push you out. As a facilitator, the word facilitation means to make easy. My entire job is to make it easier for you to get yourself out of that comfort zone. I shall never push you out of it. I'm going to create environments that allow you to feel safe to step outside of it. And that's a different theory. I'm sure I just did the camera. I don't know if people, it's just a donut. But the concept is that middle circle there is our comfort zone. This is a very basic version, but that would be, we're really comfortable. Everything from here to the outside parameter is our stretch zone and our challenge zone and our growth zone. But the key piece to reference this is the exterior circle. And we call that the panic zone. And if you bring a participant to the point of panic, and we sort of understand what that might look like, the only learning that they have is, I will never do that again. That's the learning outcome. All throughout the comfort zone, right. They're learning about themselves, they're stretching. But as soon as they hit that panic, the only thing they're learning is they're never going to do that again. And we have so much responsibility. It's like the Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility, that we're bringing them into a risk activity that we don't ever want to bring them to that point. And so we need to be better at being able to read our groups and assessing our groups. Are they ready? And there are a number of activities you can do as a litmus test to see if your kids are ready to the highs. And what I always challenge facilitators to be able to do, and that's why I like directors to be in the trainings, is to say that if you ever get to the point where your kids aren't ready, that you do not do the challenge course. That you have the capacity, that you have the backing from your directors to be able to say, no, not everyone goes on the zip. You as a facilitator should be able to have that power to be able to say that. Our executive director, has a line that says, when in doubt, play volleyball. And that's in no disparaging thing to volleyball. Volleyball is fun. But to say that if you doubt their readiness, do something else, anything else. Do something that's not going to create a moment where you bring them into panic. If I know that every single one of my kids is terrified of heights, I'm not going to say, all right, we're going to climb the highest one right now. I'm not reading my group. I'm bending. And this is the hard part in summer camp, is that a lot of staff are new. This may be their first job. And so they find it hard to challenge the authority of their director telling them they have to get everyone on there. So my piece in the training is to try to empower them to make positive decisions, to create positive change, not negative change. And I think that Challenge Course has great potential at both sides. If you incorrectly use something, you can have a catastrophic event, both emotional damage, but also physical damage. It's a risk activity. And so we have to be adequately trained, both on the technical side, can I belay? And I think that's another thing I would say is invest as much money into the facilitation as you do into the safety components of belaying. If you think belaying is important, then you tack another day on that for facilitating and reflection, because emotional safety is as important as physical safety. And it has to be understood from a camp director's perspective when they're trying to invest in training, that one day to teach people how to belay is not enough. I would struggle to be able to get people physically ready, but emotionally, they're not going to be there. So it is a very powerful tool, but it has a dark side if you are undertrained.
Right. This episode of the CampHacker podcast is sponsored by Rad Tags. Rad Tags is outfitting camps with personalized keepsakes that speak without saying a word. Rad Tags allows you to show someone they belong, building a relationship that goes beyond their last day at camp. With the goal of helping camps create awesome recognition and affiliate programs that last beyond the summer, Rad Tags is doing a monthly giveaway for GoCamp Pro listeners. Just email your answer to the following question to matt@gocamp.pro and be entered to win 5 silicone bracelets with the Rad hand sign. Each month, we'll pick a new winner. This month's question is, what is the longest standing tradition at your camp? How was it started? Don't forget, email your answer to matt@gocamp.pro with Rad Tags contest in the subject line. Also, Rad Tags is coming to ACA National. Be one of the first 50 people to booth number 522 and shout out, I'm a GoCamp Pro podcast listener, for a special gift from Rad Tags and us at GoCamp Pro. To find out more about how Rad Tags can elevate your camp program, visit zoic.ca/rad. That's zoic.ca/RAD. Rad Tags. Be and be known. Joe, I wonder for you, what would be your advice to folks who are looking to reevaluate challenge programs or to think about investing a big investment in more bigger challenge stuff?
Like in the actual physical things, Travis?
Both?
My advice would be to really look at the why, right? Start with why. Why do you want it? Just like Phil said earlier, if it's because you're competing with another camp, they have it, so we need to have it so we can get those kids, you're not doing yourself any favors that way. Just imagine you're not trying to get the kids from that camp to come to your camp. You're trying to get kids to come to camp and parents to believe in them. I think the investment part is it's this where is. Just last week, we went through with our staff here. We went through 2 hours of what does every building need at camp, right? Like, what is the maintenance? What are the hopes? What are the dreams? And when you go through it, my office manager says, "Well, we need a winterized cabin B and get air conditioning in it." And I was like, "Oh, that's great." But like, how many times have we had the necessity to house 210 people in the dead of winter, right? Like, how many people have requested that? And she's like, well, no. Okay. So if we had $100,000, we could invest it elsewhere on site. And I think that's the same thing with high ropes. I think the stories that Phil has told, I think they're more prevalent than we think, where people get grants or big anonymous donations and they jump into something. This happens with regular buildings as well, where somebody gives you $1 million, and Gary Forster with the Y in the US he had an article that I would read every year, but he essentially said, are you ready for $1 million donation? Because if your board is going to say, let's build a building, well, then that building goes over and you're like, well, we can raise $100,000 more than the $1 million cost. But then you haven't planned for the upkeep, right? So if I have $100,000 grant, I'm not going to build a $100,000 ropes course. I'm going to build a $50,000 ropes course and then plan to spend the rest of that $50,000 on the yearly upkeep for the next 50 years, right? Because the ropes course is never going to make itself money, right? It's never going to pay itself back. If you're doing it to generate income, you need to rethink your business plan. But it's this idea that you need to set aside at least what you pay to build a course, in my mind, for upkeep over the life of that course, because the course is not going to allow it to pay itself back. And I think there's so much more. And I'm interested to know what the one book Phil would recommend from a team building perspective is, because there's a ton. I was just thinking that there's a book I got first in the 80s or early 90s called Bottomless Bag Again. And there's a whole ropes course building section in the back of that book. And building a ropes course is not difficult. Building a ropes course to code, to the ACCT codes, is more challenging than I would do. But it's this idea that there's so much you can do that you don't need to spend that money. And is that the best investment for your campers and your participants to get the benefits that you're seeking, right? And that's, I would just really have people evaluate the why. It's a huge thing, because it's not a money generating program in the end. It's just graphics. You're just adding graphics to your camp. You're not adding anything dramatically different that they can't get somewhere else.
I think, to be fair to those camps who do invest or to prioritize it differently than you do, Joe, I think that there can be incredible experiences for people when they do this properly. And I take your point that it's hard to make more money because you have a ropes course this year and you didn't have it last year. But I think that there are some incredible experiences that can happen with smartly designed, really intentional courses and proper training. There can be some great benefits to that.
I had the privilege when I was in Australia. I toured a site near Melbourne that had they were installing a fully accessible high ropes course, and it blew my mind. It was just one of the most fascinating things, because you could literally roll a wheelchair up, and they had harnesses for wheelchairs, and I was just like, what? And so it was a fascinating look. But I agree. I think you can. It depends on your why.
Totally. Yeah, so many topics brought up I'd love to comment on. But the bottomless bag that you referenced, Carl Ronke, Cows, Tails, and Cobras was another book that he came up with, where he had blueprints for how to build your own course. We are still coming up on Cows, Tails, and Cobra courses that we have to retire because they were built by someone who read the blueprints in the back of that book. But yeah, I think the intentionality, the why, Simon Sinek does the Start with a Why, does a wonderful TED talk on that and some books on that concept. But, I think that's the piece that we always look at from a vendor perspective is, yes, challenge courses are phenomenal as long as they're intentionally used. And so when we do a site visit, that's the reason we bring a builder from the pure aesthetics, like, oh, is that tree going to be structurally good? Is this location a good location? But as a trainer perspective, I say, what are your goals? What's your learning outcomes? And if your learning outcome is to get everyone in the zip, then unfortunately, that's not going to work for us because it's not something that we want to also invest our time and energy into, because that's not our mission. And our mission is using that as a tool. And I think coming up with a why is so beneficial. There are also some fantastic camps in the US that also have been pioneering the adaptive programming route of being able to bring more participants in. There was a fantastic kid who came to even our course who climbed everything, and it wasn't until later that I realized he had 2 prosthetic legs. So I think sometimes we put our own limitations on who it's also for and who could this course be valuable to. But I think intentional programming is the key. And I think that's the difference between a really quality program and those programs that have a really, really cool wow factor, but don't have too much quality. It's like a lot of, visual appeal, but no substance to it.
Mm-hmm. Gab, I want to start to wrap us up here a little bit, but I wondered if you had any final thoughts on the value and what camps can get out of investing in this kind of programming.
Again, I think for me, it's a little bit what I was talking about before is using things like experiential learning to help staff members be able to process other aspects on camp. And for me, that has been our biggest takeaway. And I think I understand camp directors. I think it's tough. It's very tough to be a camp director, and you're trying to do good stuff in the sense of trying to build teams, but you also need to show parents, look, we have this cool zip line. This is a cool camp to come to because of the shiny, lovely thing. And I think that it's tough because camp directors, I think, are constantly struggling with what's on our site that we can showcase the outer to our families, and what we're in the business is the development of the inner, the inside. And that's always so complicated. And sometimes you want this facility, this show, like we do team building, and this is what we use. And so that this, going back to what Phil is saying, the struggle is real. The struggle is real for camp directors to do that balance, and going back to the why is very important. But at the end of the day, it does come down to being safe. It does come down to training your staff members between the difference of the evolution of comfort zone, growth zone, and panic zone. Teaching staff members the relationship that campers have to trust and knowledge and experience, all of those things. I've enjoyed Teachable Moments as a book that I find they've broken up great questions. They have a couple of activities, none of it, and they do talk about sequencing, and that's a common. There's 3 authors, Michelle Cummings and Jim Kame and Jennifer Sandfield who've worked on this book, and it has great questions, and it's a nice starting point, I think, for some people if they're looking at starting and bringing it into the culture, or just getting your culture back up on experiential education.
Yeah, some resources that I would recommend. One book is, if you want just an activity book that has some great sequencing and great ideas around the thematic stuff, is The 100th Monkey by Nate Folan. It was a Project Adventure publication that came out. I think you can find that on Flaghouse. And then, because it's just got a great amount of activities, it's good bang for the buck there. And then a resource, an online resource, is playmio.com. That is an activity database that has a ton of activities. It's a subscription service, although they do refresh 25 free activities. But what's nice about that, has video. And for those people who struggle with the reading of books and figuring out how the activity looks like, it sounds boring on paper, but it's actually kind of fun. The video on Playmio does certainly help. And then one last resource I would mention is our own book, a book that I helped author called Tinker. And the purpose of Tinker is to say that rather than know 100 activities okay, get really good at 10 activities and understand how to adapt the framing to be able to meet the needs of any group. because there are lots of activities that we use on a common level, and it's how do we adapt those and frame that. So it's a little bit more advanced thinking around how we use activities, but it has a great a section on framing and then a good section on reflection. And that sort of like creates those bookmark ends around an activity. And I think that gives you a good next level thinking around how to create effective programming. One thing I would just add, and be remiss without saying, that if people do want to do, have a challenge course, in terms of the amount of training that, I recommend, or High Five recommends, is that you're getting professional training at least every 3 years. And so that being an investment into what you're into that build is an important distinction. And then at least one of those people, or at least one or two people on your staff, should be what we would call level 2 trained, which means you're able to deal with rescue scenarios and stuff at height. And that's the comparison I often make, is that the investment you would put into a waterfront, the amount of money you would spend to get those people adequately trained, you should have that for a challenge course. Don't think you're building a challenge course and can't invest in the training, but have that different levels and understand that you need someone who's rescue trained, just like you need someone who's first aid trained. It's like taking a swimming pool, flipping it upside down, tipping all the water out, and then hanging ropes from it. It's the same medium in terms of risk. So understanding that from a perspective of what do I need, how much training do I need, that would be our overall recommendations there.
Excellent. Joe, do you have a top book that you'd like to recommend, or top resource?
The one that I go back to time and time again is Teamwork and Team Play with Jim Kame and Barry Jolliffe. It is because it shows, it goes over the activity, and then if you need to build anything, that's just in chapter. So in chapter 4.1, it's the activity, and 5.1 is how to build anything you need for that activity. So that and Affordable Portables by Chris Calvert is another good one for someone looking to just get those. Give you the activities. They will not give you the skill to facilitate.
Right.
And so you can, if you can read and follow along, you can lead an activity. But as Phil was saying, you need to be able to read the room and read the group and go from there. So
Absolutely. Well, thank you to the three of you. Appreciate your thoughts on challenge courses and adventure programming. And I am grateful for the discussion took us today. That means that it is time to move us on to our tool of the week.
Tool of the week.
If you are just joining us, if you're a fan of Phil's and you're found CampHacker through following all the stuff that Phil does, then I want to tell you that our tool of the week is something that we ask each one of our contributors to bring to the table to discuss here. The frame for it is that it's a tool that makes you a better camp director. And I think in this instance, I'm going to start us off. A tool that I have been hearing about for a couple of years, unrelated to the overall theme of the podcast today, but a tool that I think good camp directors can make good use of, is a free web app called Loom, LOOM.com, and it is a free way to record your screen, and it'll automatically upload to their website, and then you can send a link to something. And if you're a camp director who hasn't discovered the value of doing a screen recording, then I think you're really missing out on a lot of ways to make your life easier. Now, you can use screen recordings to help parents get through a really sticky part in your camp registration where everyone gets stuck. You can use it to show your staff how to sign into your summer staff portal. It can be used to build a library of things that a new staff member has to learn when they join your organization and they're part of your admin team. And you can have your staff, because like most of us, there are people who change jobs every single year, and from one year to the next, maybe the transfer of knowledge doesn't get made as well as possible. This is a great tool for that. So I invite you to check out Loom. Phil, what's your tool?
So my tool is, for those who know High Five, is going to be Ubuntu cards. So they are a product that we made back in 2011. But the reason I recommend that and it goes in with the conversation we've had in this episode, is it's a very cheap and utilitarian resource that you can use to be able to help create an adventure program. So the deck is $22, and there are 35 activities that we have made that start off as an activity just for entertainment value or fun, tag-based activity, connection activities, all the way up to initiatives. And I've got to the ability to be able to carry a deck of Ubuntu in my pocket and run a full day's programming. So in terms of a resource, the more I did facilitation, the more I've done team development programming, the smaller my prop bag has become, the less hula hoops I've slung over my shoulder and rubber chickens I've had in my bag. So it's become a really great resource for me to be able to utilize. And we have a book that goes with that gives you a bunch of resources as well. And there's also on our Facebook page, there is a group where we share new ideas and people share their ideas. So it's a community activity as well. So in terms of creating an adventure program or enhancing, you can't go wrong, I would say, with Ubuntu.
Yep, I love Ubuntu also. Gab, what's your tool?
My tool is Todoist, so without the L, ist. So I got a message from Travis in last November, I think, from on WhatsApp, as saying like, "Hey, are you on this?" And I responded maybe a week ago, saying, "Yeah, I am. I'm really excited that I have another place where I'm going to be very slow at answering people back." So I have a hard time keeping up with. So you can get in touch with me via email, Basecamp, Slack, DM. I get DM messages on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and I know there's other places. I just can't remember where I get messages, but
people just shouting at you.
Yeah, that is a norm, but in kind tones.
Yeah. So, just from across the street.
Yeah. We love you. So the point is that one of the things that I do is I try to answer text messages. I try to answer as much as possible, but then there's that little bleep, like if I do need to answer with to reflect, et cetera, I sort of, my ADD kicks in and my avoidance combines with my ADD, and I just go, oops. And I just don't look, I pretend like I've looked at it, or I barely read it, and then I go on to something else. So I miss that notification. And our 100th is coming up at Waro, not this year, but the next year. Have a couple of other projects that are going on. And I just have so many to-dos and so many people that are contacting me. And I have so many cue cards and Post-its and everywhere that I'm now using Todoist to write everything down. And because it's synced to my desktops, both my desktops, my cell phone, I can automatically, right when somebody messages me, I'm trying to get into the habit, even if I don't write them back, that I write in my Todoist, reply to them. You have, opened up that message, check that out later, and I assign a time. And the cool thing is that it also has plugins. So if you're on Chrome and you're looking at your Gmail, you actually have, a button where it says, add this to your to-do list. And then when you're on Todoist, you don't have to go back through Google Chrome and find that email. There's a link that already brings you through. So it helps you prioritize your stuff. It helps you create deadlines. It helps you tell you, no, I can't use this. And it's helping me just whenever I have my ADD moments in my head saying like, oh, I need to call Travis, I need to message Joe. I can just throw that in there and then continue back in my work. So I'm not obsessing about all the work that I'm not doing. So I'm trying it. I've been working on it for about a month now. It's helping. So there we go. Yeah.
That is awesome. Thank you, Gab. Joe, what's your tool?
My tool of the week is called, I'm sharing it for those watching, but it is called a wall-controlled pegboard. And it is metal. And obviously this one is orange for those who know me. But
Obviously.
The reason I initially thought of this is I have a wall just off to my right.
Yeah.
That I wanted to put something up, and I know that I don't use whiteboards. I don't use a whiteboard enough to pay for that, right? And to pay for a magnetic whiteboard.
Okay. Gotcha.
And so it is really this idea that you can have these, and the reason I was going to do one orange in the middle and green, or one green in the middle and two orange on top on either side because of the sizing.
Oh my gosh.
It is just a really inexpensive way to create a wallboard. So it is a magnetic, and I have things stuck to it, and I have hooks and other stuff. So yeah, that's my tool.
Excellent.
Sick.
Excellent.
Can I share my other tool, Travis?
Sure, you have to.
Well, I want to do a reminder, and it's up on the screen now, that the Canadian Camping Magazine Archive is fully live now. You are the first. You are the first to hear about it. On Christmas Day, I uploaded the final missing magazine, and I did it so I could remember Christmas of 2019 for the rest of my life. So all 164 magazines published from 1949 to 1989. 88. They're all up there and searchable. And so I searched for ropes course earlier, and there's a couple of issues that have ropes course in there. I've searched for mental health. It just gives us a history. It's and a usable tool. Just wanted to share that.
This is such a gift to our camp industry, the work that you did, Joe, on this, and as just a training aspect. The amount of things that you can do with this, just having your staff members, assigning one or two of your returning staff members that don't need to learn about the camp day again, and ask them to go through this and to find interesting articles that they like and present it to your camp, and to show. We forget sometimes that camp staff members don't realize that there's a larger world out there beyond our own camp, our own little nugget, and the fact that they're part of a legacy, they're part of a history. Just knowing that we're standing on the shoulders of the people before us, that we're part of this. I think it just, even if your camp was started, 10 years ago, you're still part of this culture. And there's some of the articles that I've read that were, I think written in the 50s, that were talking about how kids today are too attached to technology, and they need to get into the woods. And so it's a pretty, one, I just want to say thank you, Joe, for doing this. It is truly a gift, but the opportunities that we can.
I can say not a problem, like it just happened, but it took about 20 years of little bits of time. The reality is, and the reason I wanted to promote it here is because I know there's tons of people who listen to us, and what we need to do is make sure that this resource is known in universities and colleges for those people studying recreation, for those people who want a history. And because had I known this existed even in paper form when I was in university in the 90s, I would have eaten this up like a candy, because I went to Trent just before Christmas to finish this portion of the project. And I was in the Northway Reading Room, which is the archives of all things camping in Canada, and it was phenomenal. It was great.
Well, let me echo Gab and say thank you, Joe, for your investment in the industry. It's awesome. Excellent. Well, I want to thank the three of you for your wise and thoughtful discussion today in the CampHacker podcast. I want to remind people that if you want to catch up with people that have been on the show, like Phil, and check out High Five, I invite you to go to camphacker.tv/podcast. Matt does an awesome job of pulling our show notes together. You'll find the links to all of the things that we talked about. You'll find the High Five website, etc. And at our history as we enter into a second decade of podcasting about summer camp with this crew. There's quite a lot of history in there as well. So thank you all all of you for being part of that. So, Gab, if people want to follow up with you, where do they get in touch with you?
Well, so many places, obviously, but if the best way to get in touch with me is if you want to follow me on Instagram, Gabrielle Rail with 2 L's, and you can check out where I work at waro.com, which is OUAREAU.
Thanks so much, Gab.
Thanks.
And Joe, how about you?
If people want to follow me, they can catch up with me at my website, which is yoyojoe.com, YOYOJOE, or they can see what I do here at Pierce Williams at campisbetter.com. Do not message me on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, or Instagram if you can find my Instagram handle, because I'm not going to get back to you.
Thanks, Joe, for being here.
Not a problem.
Phil, we're so grateful that you joined us today, and we're so open to sharing your ideas and expertise. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
How can people follow up with you if they have questions?
Yes, if you have any questions about challenge courses, you can email me at pbrown, BROWN, at high5 adventure.org. I'm happy to answer all questions and every question. If you want a challenge course, we build in the Northeast mainly, but you can check out acctinfo.org to find any accredited members in your area. And one last plug I will say is if you want to hear more about challenge courses and facilitation, you can check out our podcast just by searching High Five Adventure into wherever you get your podcasts. We have an upcoming episode on 15 minutes on parachute cord, which I know that everyone has been excitedly waiting for. So
I have a renewed appreciation for parachute cord since I saw the parachute cord Baby Yoda instructions that came out this week.
You posted that, right, on Summer Camp Pros? Okay,
yeah.
I saw that. Awesome.
I think that's going to sell a lot more parachute cord this summer moving into people doing arts and crafts.
Absolutely.
Well, again, I appreciate you being here. Do check out the High Five podcast. I've listened to a few episodes myself and heard lots of CampHacker and Go Campo friends on there. So that's pretty awesome. All right. So again, go to camphacker.tv/podcast to find the notes. If you liked what you heard and have time to leave us a rating and review, I would invite you to go to camphacker.tv/iTunes to do that there. And finally, I want to say thank you to Matt, our executive producer and editor, who has pulled all this together, who helped us get Phil on the line and get us the privilege of spending some time with him. And so we're grateful to Matt. So I would say one other thing that I would ask you, if you got some good information about running camp from this episode or any other one, I would invite you to share the show. Just take a screenshot of listening to us on your phone, share that to social media, or text it to a friend. It's the easiest way for us and the best way for us to get more people involved in the discussion about running great summer camps. So that is it. And in the end, thanks for the evening, friends.
The CampHacker podcast is brought to you by Beth and Travis Allison, summer camp leadership training and marketing consultants. Thanks for listening. CampHacker, bringing your world into focus.
Hey, it's Travis. Camp directors often tell me they're just too tired to take on anything new. That's exactly why my free Resilient Camp Blueprint Diagnostic exists. It doesn't add work, it shows you progress. Quick, free, repeatable, you'll know if your systems are paying off without the guesswork. Try it today at camp.mba/Travis. That's camp.mba/Travis.